Welcome to a summer edition of 805 Sports Talk, and we're about 8 weeks away, 2 months away from the start of the high school football season, so we thought it was as good a time as any to start talking about the season. Lorenzo, you've done a good job kind of looking at the first 2 weeks of our season and picking some games that stand out to you. We'll start with week 0. You highlighted the Santa Maria Rigetti game, which, I'm interested in that one. St. Joseph is going to Visalia to take on Central Valley Christian, and then of course we have Lompoc scheduling that game at Simi Valley. So I think those right off the bat are 3 huge games. If I had a choice to pick which one I would cover, I don't know, I think it'd be a toss-up between Lompoc and Simi Valley, and that St. Joseph game to kind of kick off the central section period for the Knights. It'd be fun. What's the number 1 game for that week 0 that you see?
I'm leaning more towards Lompoc Simi Valley, and here's the simple reason why. You have 2 names. Andrew Jones, who we know very well on Lompoc's side. On the other side, though, you got Jim Binkert taking over at Simi Valley, the same Jim Binkert who brought back CIF titles at Westlake High, also won multiple CIF titles at Oaks Christian. He's been able to send guys over to the Pac-12 and the Big 10, Big 12 in his time at Westlake and Oaks Christian. There was that controversial removal of his job position at Oaks Christian. This is going to be his debut, and it's against the Braves. And it was a game that was added late, as I mentioned a couple weeks ago, because of the fact Centennial High and Bakersfield decided to drop off of Lompoc's schedule. So Andrew Jones really did some convincing to get Simi Valley and Jim Binkert on board. And I also want to remind the audience too, this is a 2-year agreement, and so Simi Valley in the future will be making a trip out to Huck Stadium. Now, I do want to get into the St. Joseph Central Valley Christian game. Not only is it a good test for St. Joseph with heading into the central section, but here's this twist. We just learned via Eliav Applebaum of the Acorn Sports, Chase Artopius is transferring to St. Joseph. You probably know that last name from being at Rigetti. He was actually the starting quarterback at Rigetti his freshman year. Now, reportedly, he's joining the Knights, and he gets his crack at Central Valley Christian, the Division IV runner-up.
Yeah, so we'll see how that whole saga plays out with St. Joseph, but yeah, I'm looking forward to that one. Chase Artopius or not for the Knights. I think it's a big game for Pepe Villaseñor's first game there, a first game for the St. Joseph program, kind of embarking on this new section, playing in the central section. So that's a great matchup. A lot of history between those 2 programs, so I think that's going to be a lot of fun. You did a great job breaking down that Andrew Jones, Jim Binkert matchup in Simi Valley. But I think that Santa Maria Rigetti game is also very intriguing. We get to see Caleb Thomas, see if Santa Maria can do anything to slow him down. That's going to be a tough one. We know Santa Maria beat Rigetti at Rigetti 2 years ago. Rigetti came back last season with a convincing win at Santa Maria, so now we're back at Rigetti. Santa Maria loses a lot from that runner-up team in Division 12. Rigetti has a whole new regime with Tony Payne there. I think Brandon Giddings is a good quarterback. So we're going to learn a lot about those 2 teams right off the bat with Caleb Thomas taking on Santa Maria, seeing if Dan Ellington can get everything he needs in order to have another strong season. And both those schools moving to the central section. So those are 3 huge games, I think, in week 0. So our season's going to start with a lot of fun. Elliot, moving to you, what kind of matchup stands out to you for week 0?
I like the Santa Maria Rigetti one for the reasons you mentioned. Santa Maria had a great year last year, but they are just lost so many seniors. But Dan Ellington has put a program in place. Let's see. We see with Andrew Jones and Lompoc, he graduates all kinds of kids and they never miss a beat. Can Ellington do that? That's a big question. And then Tony Payne. He's never been the head coach of an 11-man school, but he was really a good coach when he started up the Orchid Academy program. And he was very innovative with 2 quarterbacks in the backfield and things like that. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how the Tony Payne era begins. And he's a teacher at Rigetti High School, and he's been there as an assistant coach, and he's one of the track coaches, so he works with the strength and the conditioning for these kids. So he's not a newcomer to these kids. It's not like he's just walking in like at St. Joe. It's a brand new regime. He's getting a promotion, so I'm looking forward to seeing that one. I think that's my favorite matchup of week 0. And week 0 is coming awful early this year, but there's a lot of good games. Arroyo Grande and San Luis Obispo kick off the season. They will no longer be going against each other. They're both moving over the central section, but the leagues have changed. They are no longer competing in the same league, so rather than ending the year, they're going to begin the year. So that'll be an interesting matchup. It's not a city school or a Lompoc or San Ynez school that we concentrate a little more on, but that one is one that really interests me. And of course, I love the 8-man, and Orchid Academy kicks off week 0 against Riverside. And I want to see that. That might be the game that I end up going to. That'll be over at Pioneer Valley High School, and they're getting started up too. And that's changed because now Orchid Academy moving to the central section, they're in a huge league now. They play 7 league games, and some of the teams like Fraser Mountain, we've seen before. They've played them. Valley Christian Academy plays them. They both play them again this year. And there's a big difference between the size of the schools of Orchid Academy and Valley Christian Academy, but they both taken on Fraser Martin. But that'll be a league game this time around for Orchid Academy. So I guess the big thing is all these changes with the central section and the new leagues and teams like San Luis Obispo and Arroyo Grande not being in the same league anymore. It's going to be just so interesting to see how it all shakes out. And so there's going to be a lot of matchups that are interesting early, and we'll see how these teams get the season going.
And the other thing I'll piggyback off of is we talked about Santa Maria being young. Orchid Academy is also losing a lot as well.
Yeah.
So I'm also with you. I'm going to be curious to see how this year's group is going to fare with Darren Miller being gone. I mean, just so much talent.
Eddie Lundberg's
Eddie
gone.
Lundberg as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Orchid Academy and Doug May have done a good job of making sure they do have enough talent left over there. I think we're going to have Donovan Miller, the younger Miller brother. I expect him to have a big part in this upcoming season. I know there will be some other pieces there. They did have some younger kids that had a lot of talent. There's almost always a Sutton kid there playing or a Miller kid over there at Orchid Academy. So I think they'll be okay. Maybe not as good as they were last year or maybe the last couple of years, but I think a playoff berth isn't too much to ask for that group they're going to have over there.
Of all the schools that is going to be in the toughest shape is Santa Maria of all the area.
I agree.
As far as, I don't think Santa Maria will be in the position where they don't miss a beat as Lompoc's people seem to be with Andrew Jones, but it wouldn't surprise me. I would say watch either next year or the year after that, the Saints, because it was Dan Ellington's 3rd year that they really came on. His first year, they had a rough year. I think they won 2 games.
Yeah, they were 2.
His second year of the same group improved considerably. Nearly won the league championship. They were nip and tuck with the Pomo, and then we all know what happened last year. So it wouldn't surprise me if they really hit it in 3-year cycles. Say the 3rd year with pretty much the same group of players, they really hit it big.
I could see that. And I definitely don't anticipate a huge fall off at Santa Maria, and I think they're going to be okay with this. Looking at the schedule and the league and all that, I think they'll be in the mix. I don't think a huge fall off is in store.
Plus, another thing too is like the notion, and we've talked about this in the past as well. The notion we get at Santa Maria is that the players look forward to being taught and being coached by Dan Ellington. He brings that teacher attitude, basically turning the football field into an extra classroom, and he teaches it like it's an actual classroom. And we could tell that the players really welcome that kind of vibe.
And looking at week 1, I think San Ynez has an interesting early season schedule. They play Napomo week 0. I'm definitely interested to see how that one, kind of plays out.
That one really intrigues me. Actually, I think that's at least as an intriguing matchup as any.
Yeah, that one always kind of grabs my attention early on in the season.
They play each other early in the season, but they've never played, I don't think, in week 0 before.
Yeah.
So I think that will be interesting.
And then San Ynez has Carp in week 1. San Ynez dominated them the last couple of years, but I saw Carp make it to the playoffs and play Santa Maria. They didn't look too bad, so I don't think Carp is really that pushover that you kind of think they are typically. So I want to see how San Ynez plays, and they're going to have a chip on their shoulder again, missing the playoffs, going from Division 10 all the way up to Division 7. somehow, even though they weren't able to make the playoffs in Division 10. So again, they're going to have a chip on the shoulder. I think it's 3 years in a row that they've had a winning record, 7 wins, and I think 8 wins the last 2 seasons, and haven't made the playoffs, and they get rewarded by being bumped up 3 divisions again. So I want to see how Josh McClurg and that Santa Ynez program comes out with those early season games against Napomo and against Carp, 2 teams that made the playoffs last year. So I like the early season slate for Santa Ynez, and then we're kind of thinking once they get into the Channel League that they can, they're going to be fighting for second place, I think, in that league.
I think Josh McClurg might be shaking his head a bit over there on how they moved up 3 divisions without making the playoffs. But on the other hand, I think he is on a selection board over there, so he probably has some idea of how the process works. But as far as their league grouping, I think there is a good chance they're better off this year as far as their chances to make the playoffs. So they do have to play Lompoc still in league play, but St. Joseph is gone, and St. Joseph was the team that I think the last 2 years that kept them from making the playoffs.
Right.
All right, moving on to boxing. Kenny, last week you caught up with the Balderas brothers before they fought, and then they fought Saturday night. Not really shocking that they both won. Jose Balderas, the older Balderas brother, he fought first at the Staples Center in Los Angeles, and he won a unanimous decision. I think he's 3-0 in his career now. Has won 3 decisions. And then we have Karlos Balderas, first round knockout, another first round knockout. I think that's technically his 3rd first round knockout. His pro debut against Thomas Smith. Smith wouldn't leave the corner after the first round, so a lot of quick fights for him. I think his previous fight went 4 rounds and he won the decision there. So Karlos is 5-0 with 4 knockouts so far. Pretty much, just went as scripted, as planned over there in Staples Center with both of them winning. Karlos beat Alex Silva. I think it took about 2 minutes to knock him out with the body shot. That's his 2nd body shot knockout already as well. But talking to Karlos after that victory, it's interesting to hear his attitude and perspective on what's next for him. He talked about, I think it was last year, he went to the Staples Center. He got some tickets from Leo Santa Cruz, who's on the main card of that event. Gave him some tickets last year, and he was pretty excited just to watch a fight there at Staples Center. And then here he is a year later, fighting there and winning a fight, first round KO. And he says in his future, in the pretty near future, he wants to be selling out the Staples Center as one of the main fighters there. So I think he's on that path. He definitely has some high aspirations, but he's headed on the right track. He fought at 134 this time. He wants to fight at 132 next, and then he thinks he'll fight for a world title at 130 pounds. So he's got a lot of things going for him. He's got charisma. He definitely has some ambition, and he has a nice set plan. So everything's going to plan for Karlos Balderas, the former Olympian. His brother has also won, so good for them. Congratulations to them. We'll see what's next. Karlos says he wants to fight 2 more times this year.
I think he seems to want to accelerate his schedule a bit from what it's been.
Yeah, usually you need 20 fights or so, pro fights, to really start making some headway toward fighting for a world title. But he seems like he wants to get that out of the way within a year or 2. So who knows how soon that'll be happening. But if he stays undefeated, I think he'll be fighting for a world title at some point. And I think 130 pounds is good for him. He said he felt a little heavy at 134. 132 is good, and then 130 he should be one of the bigger, stronger fighters in that weight class at 130. And he said cutting weight's not a huge problem. So that was a good weekend, a good week really with the Balderas brothers once again. Now we'll have a youth baseball roundup. It's that time of year. Tons of Little League action, tons of Babe Ruth action. Lorenzo, you've done a good job this week. We had the Valley Championship here in Santa Maria. That was decided. Some Lompoc news with Noah Scott being honored by the Lompoc Babe Ruth. We'll start, with Monday's championship game. Did everything pretty much go as you expected? I think Northside's been a pretty strong kind of program over here with J.J. Ford. Indians look good this year, and they came away with a pretty smooth victory. What did you see from the Indians of Northside on
I
Monday?
was more in awe with how big Benjamin Munoz was. And Kenny brought this up too, when it comes to 12-year-olds, either you're going to have an oversized kid or a kid who's 4'10". Munoz represents the former.
Yeah.
But I was impressed with just the way he controlled things on the mound, especially for most of the game. I mean, it was in the 6th inning when they finally decided to pull him, but you know, it's crazy because in my years of covering Little League, I'm more used to seeing a lot of shootouts. I'm more used to seeing a lot of like games that end in 14-11 or 15-12. Munoz has such high control of this game, being able to just limit the hits on Orchid American's side. So I'll be curious to see like how much he develops. But you know, Orchid Academy, they did show a lot of fight toward the end. I mean, they may not have the size that's similar to Munoz, but you know, they definitely had some good hitters and guys who could definitely give just the city of Orchid a good glimpse of the future. But I mean, I think overall it was a very well put together game, very, very competitive game as well.
Yeah, those championship games are usually pretty good, and you know, more often than not, when we see kind of these stars at the Little League level, we'll see them eventually at the high school level. So that might be a name we need to kind of write down and remember once we see him, you know, playing at an area high school. I think we saw that Jaden Libertus was a Little League star.
I keep remembering that group: Trevor Garcia, Jaden Libertus, Slim Lopez.
Yeah, I remember those kids.
Others.
They were really spectacular as young kids.
Yeah.
And now we followed them all the way through high school, and they're still pretty good.
And I'm sure Lompoc Valley has seen names like Ryan Church when they were like right here, Denny Duffy when they're right here. And
Sure.
Yeah. So. I mean,
Well, we kept track of those guys too. Old timers like Kenny and me were around for that. I hate to admit it, but we've been doing that a long
early
time.
in our careers too.
But that's really one of
era.
that's really one of the highlights of when you really think about, you know, the summertime. I mean, it's much more than just us trying to fill our sections. We get a chance to see who the future of baseball is in this community.
Well, and I've been watching the Babe Ruths, and some of the kids we were following in Little League are now making an impact in the 13, 14, and 15 Babe Ruths, and we will feature them over the next few weeks as their playoffs begin. So, I mean, you know, it starts with the minors, really. The little kids, T-ball doesn't get a lot of coverage, but the minors, we give them as much as we can. And they had a thrilling championship game that was one of those shootouts, 13-12. The Orchid National Brewers won it, and they did it with a walk-off. They were down 12-10 going into the sixth inning and won that game. And next year we'll see some of them in Little League, and then they'll be in the Babes and in the high schools, and 5 years or so from now we'll be talking about them as our all-area high school kids.
Can you fill us in on the Noah Scott memorial thing with Lompoc Babe Ruth? You know, it seemed like baseball was such a big part of Noah Scott's life, and there's a lot of good stories coming out with how that community kind of rallied around them. What's going on with Lompoc Babe Ruth and Noah Scott?
It was a really, really emotional conversation I had with John Hernandez, who you guys know is the longtime league president in Lompoc, and he actually even fought back tears because from this day forward, the winner of the Lompoc Babe Ruth title will now hoist this right here, the Noah Scott Championship Trophy. They named it after Noah, just honoring his brave fight against leukemia, and we all know what happened with Noah last year. Well, the community just continues to go above and beyond to honor Noah's legacy. And I mean, I also had that conversation with Chuck Scott, who's the father of Noah, and he admitted that he teared up. His wife also teared up, and it was just an emotional scene, but it was really just such a profound moment for Lompoc Babe Ruth to be able to honor a 15-year-old kid. I mean, it's one thing to honor a Ryan Church or Denny Duffy, who we just mentioned, because they went on to the major leagues. Well, Noah had just such a huge impact on being able to inspire that 13-year-old, that 14-year-old, that 15-year-old with his fight and just his enthusiasm for baseball. So I thought it was really awesome to see John Hernandez, Brandon Bickey, Lompoc Valley in general, just continue to honor his legacy. Definitely
Props to John Hernandez and everybody at Lompoc Babe Ruth for doing that. It's a really great gesture, and we have a lot of good, fun, touching stories coming from youth baseball in the Little League around here, so that's really good to see. We're going to move to a national topic. The NBA Finals wrapped up last week. We weren't sure what we were in store for after that Game 1. We weren't sure if the Cavs would be able to rally from that loss that everyone was talking about. But now we know it was a clean sweep for the Warriors. And there's just been so much discussion about, what's next for the Warriors. Is Durant there for the long term? Is Draymond Green going to get paid? So there's a lot of talk about, what the future is in store for the Warriors. Lorenzo, starting with you, is this a dynasty with 3 titles in 4 years? And do you expect, more Larry O'Brien trophies over there in the Bay Area?
It's a dynasty now. I mean, let's face it, like nobody right now has 3 titles in 4 years other than the Warriors, and they run a Chicago Bulls type system with Steve Kerr. And there's also a little bit of San Antonio Spurs in there as well now. If I'm the Warriors, I would honestly pay Draymond Green. I just feel like that he's that soul, and he's that guy who like really provides the energy, like that defensive pulse, sort of like a Dennis Rodman, sort of like even a Ron Artest. I mean, I know that he's a player that most NBA teams will love to hate, but you know, let's be real. A lot of NBA dynasties, they've had that one guy that people love to hate. I mean, the Spurs had Bruce Bowen, the Bulls had Dennis Rodman, the Boston Celtics, they had guys like Danny Ainge. I mean, I can go. The most recent Laker championship teams had Ron Artest.
Yeah.
I call him Ron Artest. I don't call him Meta World Peace. So.
Yeah, I think Draymond Green sacrificed probably the most of all those players. I've heard like the core players for the Warriors sacrifice something like $100 million in salary that they could have earned if they just were concerned with that instead of winning championships. So I think Draymond Green doesn't get a lot of credit for what he's done over there in Golden State, but it would be cool to see him get paid and stay there for long term. I don't know if they'll work that out.
He's usually in the news because he's talking the most trash. I mean, you did see a shirt with his it looked like one of those things from Avengers Infinity Wars.
Well, he's been mentioned as a future Hall of Famer right there with Curry, Durant, and Thompson.
You got to remember that they need his kind of player. If you look at the great, when I was a kid, the Celtics won all kinds of championships, but they couldn't do it with just scorers. You need the guy in more modern times, your Dennis Rodman types, that pull down the rebounds, that play tough defense, that get in your face. They don't have to score a lot of points. They have to be the complementary guy, and that's what he's done. He's not that tall. I mean, he's 6'7", so compared to us, he's a giant, but for a guy playing his position, he's a little bit short, but he's really good. He gave up money to keep his team together so there would be money for Durant, but if you look at it, he was undervalued, as was Steph Curry, and they got a chip on their shoulder. I think that they've got a modern dynasty. You know, the point has been made that the Celtics won an awful lot of titles, like 8 in a row back when I was a kid, but they also only had to play 2 rounds in the playoffs, and they played a shorter regular season. Right. So maybe they didn't have all the obstacles that the modern teams have. But if you compare them with the Bulls, that Michael Jordan's team won 2, 3 back-to-back, twice. They did 3 championships. They compare favorably with that, and they've got the 3 guys that stand out, so that you can't lock down, you could lock down on LeBron James. Let him get 40 points. If your team scores 80 and loses, doesn't matter how many points LeBron James gets, and that's what happened. He couldn't win it all by himself, and I'm sure he was out of gas by the end of it. These guys can mix it up. They got guys that come in complimentary off the bench. They got guys like Zach Pachula that come in as a center that nobody knows, but he does just what they need to rebound and defend so that the stars can shine. So I think the trick is going to be keeping them together with the salary cap restriction.
I think not only can any other team match their starting 5, I think no team can match their rotation, period.
Right.
Iguodala was out, and McGee stepped in and did well. David West was solid. Sean Livingston was solid. You mentioned the other, so they have at least. There's not a team that really depth-wise can match their first 8, and I don't see it getting any easier for the rest of the league. I don't think these guys want to go anywhere. I think Klay Thompson took a pay cut to stay with the Warriors. Draymond Green is willing to take a cut, and yeah, they need him. They need that guy who can fill up the rest of the stat sheet along with the pure shooters. And anybody would take Iguodala as a number 5 man. They've got it going on over there. And as far as Steve Kerr goes, there's not another coach in the league I would take over Steve Kerr.
Draymond Green kind of, to me, he reminds me a lot more of like the new Ben Wallace when you really think about it. I mean, grabs the rebounds, plays great defense. Of course, he doesn't have the afro, and he's kind of similar in height. But I mean, I feel like Draymond's become the new Ben Wallace, probably a more verbose version as well.
Yeah, but even that works to their advantage,
Yeah.
because if you can throw the guys off their game with your your smack talk there, then that helps your team, because if they get the guys, if he gets into their heads, then they're off of their game. So I mean, all the little things that annoy the other teams help the Warriors, and it's going to be money. Will either the owner pay the penalties for keeping them together if they go over the salary cap, or will they find a creative way to do it? And they don't have a lot of room. They got a bunch of 30-something David West types that are older that could come back on very minimum $1 million contracts, or maybe replace them with the next batch of 35, 38-year-old guys to be the complementary players to give the Stars a bit of a breather and not lose much. But the trick is going to be keeping that core together, the core four.
And Draymond didn't kick anybody as well, so
That was
a big
key.
deal.
That's
Yeah.
right. I think they would have had one more
He did not
championship.
kick anybody.
Yeah,
If he had maintained his cool a couple of years ago, they would have had another championship.
yeah. A lot of Warriors fans say if Green did get suspended, that there would be 4 straight
Yeah.
titles for them,
Yeah.
something
I
like
believe
that.
that.
I mean, they had a 3-1 lead against the Cavs and blew that. If they didn't blow that lead, they would have 4 straight titles, which I don't know when's that last has happened. I'm sure maybe Bill
Boston
Russell,
Celtics, yeah.
Celtics
Russell
or something like
Celtics
that.
in the
Yeah.
60s.
They were the last ones to do that, and they won 8 in a row.
Okay.
And 11
I don't think
out
we're
of
gonna.
like 12.
I don't think we're gonna see that.
I don't think so in this
anytime
modern
soon.
era, but I mean, it's just when they're on their game, it's just a pleasure watching the Warriors play. Period. The way they work the ball, when they don't rush their threes, when they play well, I mean, it's just sweet to watch. They don't seem to care who gets the most shots and so forth.
I will go out on a limb and say this. The 2 teams we should definitely keep an eye on down the road, the Timberwolves and the Sixers. Just so much young talent, and we're starting to see that young talent manifest itself, especially in Philadelphia. So
I think Boston's
Yeah,
that one
Boston
team.
as well.
I mean, it's going to change a lot, the dynamic of the team with Gordon Hayward back and Kyrie Irving healthy. You know, you're not going to have as much usage for Jason Tatum or any of those other players. So it's going to change, but they have all the pieces to really contend. And with the Warriors, I don't care if they stay as they're built, continue to get strong. I just hope, as a basketball fan, that another team comes along and can kind of challenge them. So someone can construct a team from top to bottom like the Warriors have that can
I
challenge
think the
them.
Rockets and a healthy Celtics team are within striking distance. That they're not quite there. So we'll see if they can get all the way there.
I think Houston needs to get like a very splashy free agent pickup to basically solidify that.
Yeah, they don't quite have all the pieces that the Warriors do yet.
All right, that's all we got for this week. Thank you guys for tuning in to 805 Sports Talk.